Hey everyone, today for another vlog and today for another color for the next 3 months. The color is going to be red. I talked about sort of like the intent, which is focusing more like, basic stuff, like fundamental and, doing things rather than just talking. So, consistency, grounding myself in the body and so on. I can't say I've been super successful so far, but I've been drawing way more, at least in terms of quantity, which is what I, kind of intended, and it's going to be what I do for the next months. And yeah, but other than that, like personal life, I haven't doing super well. I feel like I've kind of been going through the motion, and I've kind of had a recent insight in regards to what I'm feeling recently, and my just general life trajectory up until now. So this is what I would call the grief of an unfulfilling job, and basically, I would summarize this as like the fact that it feels really shitty for your entire education to amount to a job that is really unfulfilling and like not it's not stimulating in any way really. Like it mentally, I don't find my job stimulating at all. Like there's no challenge, there's no like figuring out things or solving problems, even though I come from a math background. And I don't know, just like working in a company, just like it's the stereotypical thing that really needs to be hammered down of how unfulfilling it is. Just so bureaucratic. Like you could like because I work in a big company, I could basically do nothing and it wouldn't even be noticed, which is kind of a blessing in a way, but like at the same time it's kind of shitty because it means that you know basically feels like my position doesn't really matter that much because it's such a huge company or that your output is so diluted. But it's kind of a blessing, right? Because it means that I could use my time for myself. But it's kind of shitty because it means that like I'm incentivized to like not care that much. And yeah, just jobs are kind of not really interesting. I would say like the company jobs are just listening to someone having to obey the structure of company and all that, like having to take the 35 hour 40 hour week, even though you don't need that much money and so on. Like it puts a huge burden on time and energy on me, and I really don't like that. That's the main complaint I have for it. It's yeah, it just takes a lot of time away from my thing, and I don't think I get anything of it except money, which is I mean I'm never really cared much about the money, like buying things and whatever, but at least I can keep it for later, right? But yeah, it feels really shitty, like when you notice that all of your education, like it was like 12 years up until well 3 years in like before actual school, which was just like I don't know what's really called. It's the thing before starting primary school, so before you're 6. So from 3 to 6, you're gonna go to school, but it's not really school. It's just more like it's just whatever. So it's 15 years, until 18, which is the compulsory age, which is like the limit of like the compulsory education, and then 5 years of additional things. So it's 3 plus 12 plus 5, so that's 20 years of education. 20 years of quite honestly unenjoyable, painful at many times, like quite a lot of painful deadlines. I remember. Yeah, just overall, just shitty, having to deal with shitty humans, shitty adults, and looking at back at all of those 20 years, and it's like all of that just to land on a really unfulfilling job. It feels really shitty, I think. And I think this is what I'm experiencing when I'm feeling the grief of, yeah, just like, is this really what I, all of that, is this really what I worked all of that for? It's really not pleasant, and this is one hypothesis for why I'm going through the motion right now. I think in general, company jobs tend to put you into the state of going through the motions, because again you have like an 8 hour day, but like realistically you're only productive for like 3 hours in my experience, like 2 to 3 hours, and so you just spend so much time doing nothing, and it's just yeah, you just try to pass the time quicker, zone out, and so on, and just translate to your entire day and kind of throughout the week, right? And it feels pretty shitty to have that be the baseline of life. And no, thankfully, there are other things in life, but it's kind of hard to do them, right? Because of the drain of energy that the job kind of Like the fact that the job drains quite a lot of time and energy. And yeah, and also related to that, just the feeling like, because I have to make a transition now to actually doing the things that I would like to do, um, which is more, working for myself, doing stuff on the internet. It feels like, it feels very shitty. Like there's a huge sunk cost fallacy of like, do I keep going on the same path? For me, it's clearly no, right? That would be an awful decision to keep going on the same path. That would be sunk cost fallacy. But on the other hand, it means that, basically means that most of what I've worked for within society is kind of not super useful, right? Like the education. I mean, that obviously I learned how to think, how to reason in mathematics, and that will always be useful in my life. But yeah, right now I don't have much to show besides a job that isn't great. But obviously, you know, life isn't just all about states; it's also about trajectories, right? So I have to remind myself of that. But I'm also making this work because the feeling of grief doesn't go away just because you can give rational reasons, right? I think that's why people have sunk cost fallacy. I would say is because sunk cost fallacy is an emotional thing. It's a form of grief actually, and they try to like give rational reasons for why you should just quit or whatever, but like they don't acknowledge the grief that it feels really shitty right, to do something and for it not to amount to anything. And yeah, just this feeling like I'm kind of behind in life again. I don't like that term. I've talked about it in the society's clock or whatever in the previous period. Um, but yeah, there's still that feeling like I'm behind, especially because now I need to make a transition, right? Like I need to basically go to another field and whatever, or like do other things that I'm not comfortable with, and it feels kind of shitty, right? Like transition periods are always difficult, and this is definitely a huge transition period of my life. And lastly, I would just like to mention something kind of important. Kind of came up when I was thinking about like the caveats with the advice to what you love. I think there are many caveats. I think overall it's a good advice. I'm gonna link the thread I made, and there was one really good response from someone else. And I think it's good advice overall because if you're gonna do something for a long time, the only way you can really do it for a long time is if it's like enjoyable, fulfilling, whatever, right? Interesting to you, right? For example, there's a piece of advice thrown around exercising, which is that the best form of exercise is the one that you can keep doing, for a long period of time. And I very much agree with that. And I think I always think of that in other, in like a more general term. Like that's really what I think the mentality you should have with regards to a job. But just uh, the best job for you is the one that you can do for a long time. And I think doing what you love is kind of in that right direction, but I think it has many problems. And one huge problem I can see is that there's a huge difference between the thing that you actually enjoy and that you would enjoy doing, and the thing within society that has the same name. Like, it's kind of weird to say it, but when you actually feel the difference, it's actually huge. So, for example, some people say that they like programming, for example, right? And it's fair, but like if you tell them to like go work in a company programming, I think you're kind of leading them to a thing that they would not like because if you actually zoom onto what people enjoy when they're programming, usually it's because they are working by themselves first of all, right? So one person versus like huge projects is a huge difference if you've ever programmed in a huge environment. Um, so it's one person versus a fuck ton of people in a company. And another thing is like when you're working for yourself, you're working on things that you actually care about, which is not really the same thing as in companies, right? And the amount of freedom, like the difference in freedom, is so huge that basically I would say that the first situation could be really enjoyable for someone, maybe like making their own game or like just doing things for themselves, whatever. And the second situation could be highly unenjoyable because there's so little freedom, so much friction that you have to deal with in your company, right? Like if you want to make any change within the code, you have to like go through a procedure and so on. You have to ask people. It's such a mess, and you have to like read other people's code and deal with. It's such a mess. Like it's a huge difference, right? And the thing is that those two things that have the same name, they have the same name programming, but they're so different. I think that's a huge trap in the within society of like leading people to jobs that they hate. It's this like confusion between things that have the same name because there's not enough nuance about what makes a job enjoyable. So I think what generally makes a job enjoyable, I think the book, what was the name of the book? So Good They Can't Ignore You is the name of the book. It has many of the important principles, and many of the rebuttals against the passion hypothesis, as it's named in the book. I think the main reasons why people enjoy a job are the following. One, they are good at it. Two, they have freedom from the job. So again, the example of programming by yourself versus programming with a ton of people. Third is that they kind of find meaning from the job. So like, it feels like they're working towards something important for them and so on. Which is another huge problem with company jobs, is that often the direction of the company is just kind of shitty. Like it's not really doesn't really feel like you're working on anything important within society. Like for example, I work in an insurance company, and let's just say I don't let's just say I don't have insurance in a very high regard. Right? Like they don't. Not only do they not feel very important for me, they don't feel very healthy for society. But whatever. And yeah, I think those are the three ones. Like being good at something, what else? Freedom and meaning. And I think other ones that are important are also, the fact that you find something interesting is obviously important, right? It also helps you being good at it, obviously. But I use the word interesting rather than passion because I really hate the word passion as well as what is talked about in the book. The book is basically, one huge part of the book. So Good They Can't Ignore You is the fact that passion is kind of a bad. It has so many unrealistic expectations, right? And not just unrealistic expectations, but like implicit ones, such as the idea that you can just find the thing you will love and you will never hate it or whatever. Very unrealistic, right? So just like it would be unrealistic to have that expectation in a relationship, for example. And it's yeah, the word passion is just kind of disgusting. It really is kind of like it really is like the parallel of a love at first sight, but for a job. It's not really how it works, in my opinion. And but on the other hand, I think there's definitely such a thing as being interested, right, in something, like just wanting to know how something works, wanting to learn more, and so on, right? Like it doesn't mean that you will love it every single minute of your life. That doesn't mean that, right? Just because you find something interesting doesn't mean you love everything about it, and doesn't mean that you will always love it. But it just means that you want to learn more about it. And I think thinking in terms of like interesting, which is the fourth point I'm making about what makes the job fulfilling, is like it's more like realistic than passion, because first of all it accounts for the fact that things will not always be nice, feel nice rather, which is especially true for the beginning, right? Like the beginning is very enjoyable in anything. That's just how it is, and that doesn't mean that you don't have passion or whatever. The second thing about focusing on being interesting is that it's just more realistic, right? Like you're not expecting some huge fire within you to just love something. It's just just more like like you're curious about something, right? Like you're curious about physics, you're curious about computers, you're curious about relationships or whatever you're interested in. Like it's just more tame, more realistic. Like it's like focusing on contentment rather than happiness. I would say it's just more stable. And the third thing is that I think most people are quite a lot of interests. I would say. I mean, I don't really know that. Maybe most people are not interested in anything. I don't know. But I feel like people in general are interested in several things, right? Not just one. And I think that is actually a good thing, right? Not just be interested in a single thing. Although if that fits your description, then that's fine as well, I think. But like the things like we call it a passion, right? It's always singular, but like I feel like that puts a lot of pressure onto finding the right thing. Like just like finding the quote unquote right partner. It has many good parallels with finding a relationship actually. Just like finding a partner that just puts so much pressure onto it. Like you really need to figure it out, and like that's not how really life works. You don't figure out things like that in life. It's more like experimenting and just trying things enough to get a feel for them, and continue and going down avenues that are promising, and no longer going down avenues that are not. Like it's yeah, it just gives you like the illusion of plan, which is really dangerous in my opinion, because like life doesn't really work according to your plans, like ever, I would say. Like life is not something you can plan around. It's more like something you can navigate skillfully. Uh, just like a sailor can, just like there are many good sailors, right? There are many qualities that make a good sailor on the sea, but you can never like control the sea. Like it's not something within your control. It's only something you can skillfully navigate. I think it's similar in life. You cannot plan in life, because planning is only possible with like very uh, simple systems, and life is very complex. Like it's much more complex than the human mind can comprehend, I would say. And yeah, I think this is about everything I had to say about the grief or unfulfilling job. Towards the end, I didn't really focus much on the grief, but I really want to hammer down the point that grief is not something that can be dealt with just thoughts. And I think this is why a lot of people fall into the sunk cost fallacy, is that they don't address the emotion of grief, like how shit it feels to work at something and feel like it didn't amount to anything. It really is a form of grief. Like maybe there's another word for it that is not as severe, right? Because grief obviously is related to death usually, and I wouldn't say it's necessarily that bad, but like it's definitely on the same spectrum, right? Of same vibe of emotion, but maybe not the same intensity. But it's still quite serious, I would say. The ability to move on from see, I was about to say the ability to move on from mistakes, but it's not even a mistake. Because a mistake would be like if you had all the information, but you just you just went for the wrong one. But in this case, when someone goes for an unfulfilling job that they were promised to be like better than what they thought, which is my case, I would say I thought math would be lead to better options than I currently have. Well, it's not really a mistake, right? It's more like lack of information, maybe lack of. I mean, I don't know. The thing is, I I'm not a fan of university, right? But I don't think I would have had the resources and the path and the vision to do something else than university, right? So you know, I wouldn't really call that a mistake. It's just undesirable um, unfolding of life. It's not like I really had the information, honestly, that it would be something I hate because when I started university, I was a lot more. I wasn't as like independent in my thinking and my vision of life than I am now because now, yeah, I can't really see myself working for anyone else in over the long term, right? Like over the next years, it's probably going to be something I do just to get the money, but over the long term, it's definitely not something I want to do. And I was not like that when I was you know first getting to uni, so I became a very different person, is what I'm saying. So it doesn't really feel like I made a mistake. It just feels like I learned more about myself and the world, and now the path I'm on is just not really something I want to do. And obviously I'm still young, right? So this always I'm 23, right? So I shouldn't like dramatize things too much. It's obviously I have a lot of time and energy to work towards something better, and but it just feels important to let those things out, right? To just express the fact that yeah, I wouldn't say like my degree is useless, obviously, because it's a math degree, obviously it's quite in high demand, but like in some ways it kind of feels useless. Like it doesn't feel useful for the type of path I would want to walk, no. Which I'm not super certain about, but I know that it will be about making money on the internet, and it will be about conversations, being myself, authenticity, drawing, art, and just talking, expressing myself, sharing ideas that have helped me and might help other people. That's kind of the path I would want to take. And in many ways, it feels like math, like it's not really part of that, but maybe that's just how it is. Like it would be really dumb to try to like go down a path that doesn't fit me anymore. Like that's obviously sunk cost fallacy. Is the end of the game, right? So yeah, that's about everything I had to say. I have been talking for 19 minutes. That's shorter than I thought. But yeah, thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.